In the Two Towers, Gollum tells Frodo they don't need to risk being captured at the Black Gate because he knows a secret, safer path through the Dead Marshes.
Dead Marshes. Yes, that is the name.
But these scenes go by very fast, and a lot is left unexplained. For example, who are those elves under the water? The viewer can't even be sure whether they are really there or just illusions. I mean, one of them actually opens his eyes. Like many things in the movies, the full context do exist in the books, but there's no time to explain it on screen. So let's investigate what's really going on here. In the original material, this passage is far darker and more magical than in the films. These small flames we see in the movie are something different. In the book, they are ghostly lights that confuse travelers and lure them toward death. I'll quote only a few parts because the passages are long. Quote from the Two Towers. When lights appeared, Sam rubbed his eyes. He thought his head was going queer. He first saw one with the corner of his left eye, a wisp of pale sheen that faded away, but others appeared soon after, some like dimly shining smoke, some like misty flames flickering slowly above unseen candles. Here and there they twisted like ghostly sheets unfurled by hidden hands. He went some paces back into the darkness, not daring to move far, or to call in more than a hoarse whisper. Suddenly he stumbled against Frodo, who was standing lost in thought, looking at the pale lights. His hands hung stiff at his sides. Water and slime were dripping from them.
"Come, Mr. Frodo," said Sam. "Don't look at them. Gollum says we mustn't. Let's keep up with him and get out of this cursed place as quick as we can. If we can." "All right," said Frodo, as if waking from a dream. "I'm coming. Go on."
And later, Gollum warns them.
"Slowly, very slowly, very carefully, or hobbits go down to join the dead ones and light little candles. Follow Smeagol. Don't look at lights."
Now let's talk about the dead elves beneath the water. Most of them are Sylvan elves, kin of Thranduil and Legolas. In fact, Legolas's own grandfather, an elf named Oropher, lies somewhere in that place. Here's some context. At the beginning of the trilogy, we see a condensed version of the end of the War of the Last Alliance between elves and men. As shown in the films, something unusual happened in this war. Instead of Sauron marching his armies against elven and human cities, it was the Alliance that marched into Mordor. They did this because they knew Sauron's physical body had been destroyed in the downfall of Numenor, and that he was still weakened. Even so, his forces were already besieging cities across Middle-earth. Elendil, Isildur, and Gil-galad realized that if they didn't unite and strike Mordor directly, Sauron's armies would destroy their realms one by one. That decision led to the formation of the last alliance of elves and men. This is where things get more complex and interesting. While most of the elves in the alliance were Noldor and most of the men were Dunedain, famous for being taller than the native peoples of Middle-earth, the alliance also included other groups. There were native men, Sylvan and Sindar elves, woodland elves, and even hosts of dwarves from Khazad-dûm. Oropher, Legolas's grandfather, led a reckless and disastrous assault that cost 2/3 of his army, including his own life. Quoting Unfinished Tales, "The Sylvan elves were hardy and valiant, but ill-equipped with armor or weapons in comparison with the Eldar of the West. Also, they were independent, and not disposed to place themselves under the supreme command of Gil-galad. Their losses were thus more grievous than they need have been, even in that terrible war. Mal-galad and more than half his following perished in the great battle of the Dagorlad, being cut off from the main host and driven into the Dead Marshes. Oropher was slain in the first assault upon Mordor, rushing forward at the head of his most doughty warriors before Gil-galad had given the signal for the advance. Thranduil, his son, survived, but when the war ended and Sauron was slain, as it seemed, he led back home barely 1/3 of the army that had marched to war. In the Two Towers, Frodo even confirms that the elves he saw had silver hair, a typical trait of the Sylvan elves. I saw them, many faces proud and fair, and weeds in their silver hair. In the films, we only see elves. But in the book, Frodo, Sam, and Gollum see much more than that. They see Dunedain, whom Gollum calls tall men, as well as elves and orcs. Quote,
Yes, yes, all dead, all rotten, elves and men and orcses, the Dead Marshes. There was a great battle long ago, yes. So they told him when Smeagol was young, when I was young before the Precious came. It was a great battle. Tall men with long swords, and terrible elves, and orcses shrieking. They fought on the plain for days and months at the Black Gates, but the marshes have grown since then, swallowed up the graves, always creeping, creeping.
A great battle long ago. Elves and men and orcses, all dead, all rotten.
And here's something very interesting happens. Sam asked the same question we asked at the beginning of the video, whether the dead are truly there or if this is some kind of mirage.
But that is an age and more ago, said Sam. The dead can't be really there. Is it some devilry hatched in the Darkland?
Who knows? Smeagol doesn't know. You cannot reach them. You cannot touch them. We tried once, yes, precious. I tried once. But you cannot reach them. Only shapes to see, perhaps. Not to touch. No, precious. All dead.
Sam looked darkly at him and shuddered again, thinking that he guessed why Smeagol had tried to touch them. All of this points to something deeply unsettling. The bodies are not truly there. What we see in the Dead Marshes appears to be spiritual projections, echoes of lives violently destroyed, bound to that place by the brutality of their deaths, the corruption of the land, and the lingering influence of Sauron and Mordor. They can be seen, almost recognized, but not touched. The text strongly suggests that Gollum once tried to grab one of them, likely to feed, and failed. But unless Gollum is lying, which seems extremely unlikely, these are not physical bodies. They are restless spirits, trapped in the marshes. To wrap things up, I think it's worth looking at why Legolas's grandfather rushed into that disastrous assault that cost him 2/3 of his army. In short, there are two main reasons. The first is Oropher's personality. He didn't like getting involved in the affairs of other peoples, or even other kinds of elves. As written in Unfinished Tales, despite the desire of the Sylvan elves to meddle as little as might be in the affairs of the Noldor and Sindar, or of any other peoples, dwarves, men, or orcs, Oropher had the wisdom to foresee that peace would not return unless Sauron was overcome. So even though he preferred independence and distance, Oropher understood that Sauron had to be confronted. But there's a second reason, and this one is more personal. Oropher held a deep resentment toward the Noldor. Before settling in Mirkwood, he lived in Doriath, where the Quenya language had been banned. That ban existed because news had reached Doriath that the Noldor had massacred the Teleri at Alqualande, slaughtering them to steal their ships. That linguistic ban symbolized a breakdown of trust between the elves descended from the Teleri and the Noldor. Of course, by the time of the War of the Last Alliance, the situation was very different. Thousands of years had passed, and Gil-galad, now High King of the Noldor, was a noble and honorable ruler. Even so, old wounds don't heal easily, and Oropher refused to place himself under the command of a Noldoran High King. Special shout out to Alex Weber, the very first channel member. Thank you for the support. If you like this kind of video, consider subscribing and leaving a like for more. It really helps small channels like this. Take care and see you in the next one.